Ever felt torn between celebrating students who've shown up every week and then the ones who ghosted your ministry, but still want the spotlight? Yeah, this episode is for you.
I believe that we stand on the verge of a historic moment.
You ask them what it is about rock and roll music that they like, and the first thing they'll say is the beat, the beat, the beat.
I found pardon for my past, power for the present, bright prospect for the future.
If you talk to the average teenager of today, I know what it does to you.
That could have an unparalleled and unprecedented impact.
I've got a story to tell. Have you?
This episode is all about Senior Sunday, or Senior Recognition Sunday,
or
some would say. Or
Graduate Commissioning Sunday if you're fancy like me.
Well, we're not all that fancy.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what was fancy was Viennetta ice cream. Do you remember that when we were kids in the 90s? What? Maybe you were just rich. But for all of us regular middle class folk, John, we used to see the Viennetta ice cream, and it was like an ice cream log that you'd cut, and they'd set it in champagne glasses. And when I was a kid, they sold it at like Walmart. But I used to think Viennetta was like that if we could afford Viennetta, we were going to make it. And it was kind of like Fancy Feast commercials, but for ice cream.
I legitimately, this is the first time I've ever heard that word.
We got to play a clip of it like right now.
Breyers has created a spectacular ice cream dessert called Viennetta. But despite its delicious premium ice cream, with its irresistible, crisp, chocolatey layers, Viennetta could leave you with one small problem. New Viennetta from Breyers. One slice is never enough.
But it's so appetizing. Like, I wanted Viennetta. Anyway, it's not important. It has nothing to do with what we're saying today, but it is fancy. Viennetta ice cream. But yeah, Senior Sunday. Senior Sunday is, I think that it's incredibly important. I think that it is everything that a kindergarten graduation is not. It is meaningful. It is chock full of accomplishment. It is what you want your kids to be working toward, and it's a great rite of passage, right?
Yeah.
But the question is, some guys either struggle to do one at all, and I get that because I've been there. Sometimes guys struggle to make it meaningful because it's like, with all the other millions of things we have to do, a lot of the guys and gals that are doing student ministry just don't have time to plan one. And 3, sometimes we just don't realize how meaningful it is, so we just don't do a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think some guys too. I think some guys it's just a slideshow and a gift bag, and
To
it can
an
be.
old song.
It can also be a moment where.
Do you remember Vitamin C's graduation song that we all played when we?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I mean, there's still guys playing that probably.
Yeah. Well, I think too, for some guy, number one, I think Graduate Sunday means more the longer you've been with the students that you're with. Like for me this year, when I showed up at Rosemont 7 years ago, my seniors graduating were not even a month out of 5th grade. Whew. And so these are my little babies, and I've been looking forward to, celebrating them. But then you've also got the kids who show up and, maybe you haven't seen them since 8th grade.
Yeah.
Maybe you haven't seen them except for like once or twice a year. And so there's part of it where you kind of go back and forth between, is it something that you did? Is it something that you didn't do? Is it just that you're frustrated with their parents? There's all kinds of different, but earlier on in ministry, I can remember getting really frustrated, but we'll talk about some strategies and how to help serve those families on that day, because got news for you. The way that you celebrate those students matters just as much.
I'm going to tell you that I think, you're right, that the more and more, sorry, I had something on mic. The more and more that we do that stuff, like the more and more we celebrate them, if you said it does mean a lot for the 6th grade to the 12th grade, like that you've had all those years or 3 or 4 years or whatever it may be. But the truth is, it really also holds so much power to build some long-lasting relationships, even with the students you didn't have. And so we're gonna talk about a few things. We're gonna talk about graduation Sunday, and then behind the wall, which, guys, you can try. By the way, you can try our whole network out for free for 30 days and see everything that you're missing, all the curriculum, the resources, the tools, the second half of the podcast. Just do it. Free is less than you pay on any coffee, not just the $27 a month that it would cost for nothing. So you should jump onto it. But we're going to talk about after graduation Sunday, but we're going to talk about graduation Sunday today. So as we get started in all of this, John, you do a great job. You've been doing it a long time where you're at. I think let's just ask the question, because I've done it at several churches as well, but I love that there's kind of a diverse situation here, because a lot of times I've had to catch up with people. Like I've had to catch up and really hammer through. We're going to tell some stories about that. But why for you does Senior Sunday matter so much?
Well, I think number one, I think that we ought to celebrate accomplishment. We ought to celebrate accomplishment because it's worthy to be celebrated. And the majority of your people, you make commitments. I know for us, like we've got a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old. And we stood before our church family and we covenanted with our church family that we were going to do our very best to raise our children up in the admonition of the Lord and within the context of the local church. And these families, most of them, have done that same thing. And so Sunday is a big deal for your graduate, but it's also a really big deal for your parents. I mean, the parents are coming to a really critical place in their child's journey. And so, one of the things that I believe about why graduation Sunday matters is it's not just about tradition. It's a moment of spiritual significance in the life of your church. It is a cultural milestone that we have an opportunity to reframe spiritually. And we can speak to things for that student. We can speak to their identity. We can speak to their calling. We can remind them of their community. But I think that there's just a real opportunity for us to model some real spiritual impact for our students. I mean, I know that for you, like I'm sure you've had moments where people have laid hands on you and prayed.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're incredibly meaningful.
Yeah, those are really meaningful. So we have a student who just moved last weekend. His whole family moved down to Florida, and he was a real quiet student, sweet kid. But I felt compelled, because I moved a lot as a kid. I felt compelled to have our students pray over him. And he's like super shy, doesn't want to be touched, doesn't want to be the front of attention. And so I said, look, we're going to pray for him. He's not going to get out of his seat. He doesn't know that I'm doing this, but here's what I want you to do is I just want you to pray out loud. And I want him to hear you pray. And so this whole room of middle school students just starts praying over their friend and over this kid that some of them know, some of them don't know. And when I tell you, like, he was just weeping, he was just absolutely weeping. And I think it was just a moment for him where I would guess nobody's done that before. Yeah. And so for some of these students, that's an opportunity to remind them. Graduate Sunday is an opportunity to remind them, these are your people when you head into moments of crisis who are committed to being prayer warriors for you and your family. They're here to support you.
Well, and you said something, and what you're saying, I think is so important about this, is that I think in the same way that we tell parents you're the primary disciple of your student, but they struggle to know how to do that or what that means. I think sometimes we say so often, man, student ministry is parent ministry, but because of just lack of investment and pouring in, student pastors miss that a lot of time. Like we're like, well, we want to do that, but how do we do it? And I think Senior Sunday, you mentioned, it's just as much for the parents as it is for the student. It's a way to celebrate their students, it's a way to bring them in. And I think it's one of those essential moments that you can just easily capitalize on. It's a moment you don't have to create to do good parent ministry if you do it right. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think going overboard, like sometimes we go overboard, but we're just not very good planners. And so it's not really overboard, it's just bad. But when you can go overboard in a good way, I think it absolutely makes a huge difference. And so, praying, laying hands over students, right? We want to be doing things like that anyway in our ministries. But what I like that you do is that you treat it like a commissioning, right?
Yeah.
You're sending out missionaries and people. I think
that's what we've been training them for.
Absolutely.
I mean, for the students that have been with us, that's what we're training them for. And even more than that, like, you're commissioning them, but it's an opportunity for the church to model intergenerational blessing.
Absolutely.
When we do that. And, for many students, this is an affirming thing. It communicates that you're loved. It communicates that you belong here, but it also communicates like, hey, we're sending you off into this next phase of your life, and we've done the work on our part to prepare you to go into this next season as missionary Christians and to live on mission in whatever phase of life they're heading into.
Well, I think absolutely. I mean, at Graduation Sunday, we treat it sometimes at least seniors or families even may think this is the finish line, and it is in a way, but really what it is for the church is it should be like a launching pad, right?
Mhm.
And so let's take a minute. Let's think about what makes Graduation Sunday, man, excellent. What would make it good for you? And I think I'm always that person that says let's keep it contextual. But I want to tell you just a quick story. When I took over a church, I took over a student ministry in a church that was incredibly unhealthy. The sad thing was eventually I found out it was the church that was unhealthy too. But I thought this ministry had just, if you can think, I mean, everybody in that group wanted 20 years ago. That's all they wanted. 20 years ago, 20 years ago, 20 years ago. I had parents telling me, well, why don't we do more camping trips? We did when in the 80s, when I was doing ministry, that was important for me. And I said, well, it's not important for your student. And like there's so many weird things. What was the interesting thing is that if you do event-driven ministry, you starve your people. That's like yo-yo fast. It's like yo-yo diets, right? You end up never really losing the weight that you want to lose or being healthy or any of those things because you're just constantly putting your body through feast, famine. And it's the same thing in event-driven ministry. What I noticed was I came in and there were all of these things for seniors in their senior year, like a ridiculous amount of things. One of them, in fact, was, if you can imagine how dangerous this was a remnant from 20 years ago. Back when a senior trip was hard to afford, the church did a senior trip. And they did this senior trip, and I can't remember what they called it, but I wasn't going to do it. And it was, they didn't tell any of the parents where the kids were going for a week. They took the kids on a trip, didn't tell them where they were going. At one point, one kid had gotten a piece of metal shot through a bus into their face and almost lost part of their face. And during one of the years they did this, and they still did it. And then even the pastor didn't know where they were going. And at one point, they drove from Louisiana to the Canadian border, I was told at one time. I mean, this is a long trip in a bus. And they would do this whole thing. But there was nothing about Jesus about the whole thing. Because they said at one point, they were like, you need to make this like a missional thing. So they got a big bag of teddy bears and dropped it off at a firehouse. Like that was on the trip. That was their missional thing.
Yeah. I remember that part of the story when we talked about that's such an odd thing.
So dumb. And it was just, but that was the senior, they called it mystery trip or something like that. And it was just this thing that is absolutely unsafe and uncool. And I don't know any parent that would want to do that except for these parents here. They're like, well, they've always done that. And I was like, well, it's not safe.
Isn't that crazy that sometimes we've always done it that way before can get you into some situations where it's like, but why have you done it that way before?
It was so bad. And part of it was I came in and the pastor had told me, you have to make these immediate changes. And I would not have just immediately changed all of the things. I would have given it some time, but I had to make all these changes. So, here's what the sad thing was. And this is just a side note, how your leaders need to be thermostats, not thermometers, because the students bought in real fast. But after about a month and a half of the leaders complaining about how much they hated it because it wasn't what they'd always done, the students didn't like it either. And so it was just
to be clear, thermostat versus thermometer, what we're saying is
thermostat.
Go ahead. Yeah. Well, I was just going to say thermostats set the temp. Mm-hmm. Thermometers read the temp. And so you got to be able to be a leader that is able to come in and set temperature, but also it is helpful to be able to gauge.
But you got to read thermostats, read and set.
That's right.
But just to read it anyway, it was just a long thing. And so we had, I think it was like 15 seniors that were coming regularly. It was a pretty large ministry. We had about 15, had about a couple hundred kids a week. And so we had these seniors and we're getting ready to get them graduated out. And then I send out a senior sign-up form for senior recognition. And my thought was just this. It didn't matter if it was me, if it was you, if it was the next person. They were not going to like whoever was there because they weren't the guy that had been there for 20 years or the guy that was doing the same thing the guy had done for 20 years. And so it was just, I knew where all that angst was coming from. But here's what's crazy. We did a senior sign-up. And so you have all these big trips and all these crazy things that they would do, but that were event driven. They weren't consistent discipleship. They weren't healthy. And then finally we get to senior Sunday and my 15 seniors swelled to like 40. I mean, it was like, I don't even know. I've never even seen it. And I hadn't looked them up on a roll and I was like, because I've been here since they were like freshmen. And so it was the biggest just jump of no-shows I'd ever seen. And they come in and I'm just shaking hands. And so what we did was we did a song and a video for them. And it was that 1 year Avril Lavigne said she was a Christian and she said, I got to keep my head above water. I was like, we could use that song. So we use it, and then I was reading students their stuff. And so here, but what I did was I thought, okay, and this is, I know all of this story to this point, but what made this so excellent for us was that I said, one, these people are all about legacy. And so anything I can do to include all of these people in this and students in this, I want to do it. Two, they were the most like clan driven school people ever. So like I did like school colors and for all these different schools that came and all these different things. But what we did is we got them up on Sunday morning. We took a picture. We had them all come up on stage and we gave them a gift. I still think the best gift you can get your student, depending on where they're at, is an ESV study Bible or a life application study Bible. I think depending on where they're at, I just think those are the best options pound for pound on study Bible. And it's a meaningful gift. But we gave them that. We gave them a book that was a good book at the time. But what I had all of the juniors do is that I had the juniors who they were close with all write them notes and then go into those Bibles and highlight passages in those Bibles that they were praying over them. And then I had junior blessings where we went from there to a lunch. And I had the lunch catered. Everybody, family had their own table. And then I had all the students come up. We showed their pictures again, rotating. And then the students would walk up and they would. The juniors were almost in tears, like saying, I'm praying this over you and this is for you. And I had two families that hated me. I'm pretty sure they said they hated me to some people. And they walked up to me and they shook my hand and they said, this is the greatest senior Sunday we've ever seen. Thank you so much. Now, I wasn't close with those people. I didn't end up being close to those people, but this wasn't an event-driven thing. This was a natural occurring thing that we would do. And in doing that, we were able to, doing something with excellence, just reading the room and reading the elements that I had, those kids were loved, cared for, they were prayed over. And it absolutely set the tone for who we were as a church. And it also kind of got some of the pastor that was leading me was not very good. And it got some of the stank of me having to do what I was told to do off of my back because they knew that I genuinely cared. Mm-hmm. So the question, I guess, becomes in your context and in our context, how do we take something from we have to do this to, man, this is excellent. And this absolutely celebrates them.
Well, and you know, one of the, so there's, this is the third church I've served at and I've seen it done 3 different ways. So, and I think each of them are cool in their own way. You know, the first church I served at, they get yard signs made up.
Oh, that's cool.
That like, you know, First Baptist graduate, and then they go put them in the kid's yard. And then they also have one that goes at the church. So they'll go drop it off, put it in the kid's yard, like graduating senior from First Baptist. And then they have them also in this little green area of their church so that people in the community can see and celebrate. And then they have almost like a, what do you call it at Halloween where you decorate the trunks? Trunk or treat.
Yeah.
So they have a trunk or treat, but they do that for the graduates. So the graduating seniors and their families, they decorate their trunk with all of the different things for the kids.
That's cool.
And then the church has a drive-through. And so people will drive through the trunks and they'll actually
throw eggs at the kids.
You know, well, maybe some character. Of them, but they'll congratulate them. But it gives people an opportunity to come by. I think that's really neat.
That is cool. Yeah.
You know, it's a unique thing. The church that I served at in Nashville had a quilting ministry, which sounds odd, but basically, if you were born in the hospital of the local area, they had baby blankets that they had sewed and quilted.
No way.
With prayers that they'd prayed over, and then they would give them. But then also when you graduated high school, they would also make all of our graduates, they would make them quilts. And then we would just bring them up at the end of service and we would pray over them. So kind of unique.
That's
really
awesome.
unique.
Yeah. Well,
and then,
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say,
froze on my screen. So as you were talking, I thought you were
sorry. No. Then here, the way we do things here, you know, we've changed and adapted over the years to make it more intentional and make it more personal. One of the things that they love to do here, and they've done it historically, is they do the whole pomp and circumstance deal where the kids walk in their cap and gowns.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then at that point, like I'll get up and I announce like, this is John Smith and his parents are, you know, Carl and Brenda, and
they're such unique
they've
names.
been, you know, blah, 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 made up names. And their plan, you know, they just graduated from, and they are headed here in the fall. The thing that I don't like to do is I don't like to get into like the career aspirations. Like if they give me more than, you know, I'm planning to attend the University of Georgia in the fall.
Right.
I just read they're planning to attend the University of Georgia in the fall. Because I had one kid that like he was off the charts intellectual.
Yeah.
And he was going for some kind of like space engineering thing where like he was going to go be a NASA astronaut type thing. And I'm like, I'm not reading that. Like, congrats, but I'm not reading that.
Right.
And they were like, well, why? And I'm like, well, that's like 10 years away. And so I'm not going to say like this kid's graduating and he's going to go into the trade and he's going to go be an electrician. And that kid deserves to be celebrated with as much fervor as the kid who just graduated high school and is going to the University of Georgia or going here, because what they've accomplished is the same. And we don't need to celebrate what they dream of being any different.
Right. Right.
So I'm big on that. Like, let's celebrate what they have in common.
But, you know, some of this stuff, too, like you said, and I think that sometimes we get into messes or things like that that are not beneficial and we don't know how. And I think a lot of that gets fixed pretty fast when you like through your sign up forms. Like if you don't ask those, like, don't ask, what do you want to do one day? Like I had a kid who, it was really funny on stage because it wasn't condescending or bad, but I remember looking back on it. This kid's name was Cameron. He was like, once going to be a helicopter pilot in the Marines. And I went, well, who wouldn't want to be? And like everybody started laughing on stage. But I was like, to that point about it being, you know, you said pomp and circumstance in your gowns. We had that at that last church I talked about. But I've been at a couple other churches where, man, one church, we didn't do a whole lot on Sunday morning in front of the church, but we did a lot of other things. And then one church was really casual. So they just came up in regular clothes and we prayed over them. So it really is. But it's funny because you can fix, and you can, if you're not sending out forms like Microsoft Form, Google Form, Wufoo, any of those things, then that's on you. So like when you send it out, think about exactly what you want to read.
Can I tell you pet peeve? I just want to say pet peeve about
peeve away, sir. Peeve away.
I hate when I tell you that I despise this question.
Right.
And I've had people get upset with me because I took it off the form. So the form was always like, you know, what's one person who's impacted your faith and why? I think that's fine. What I like to do with that is I like to figure out who that is and then put that in a note and send that to the person privately. I'm not going to read that out because I think it's deeply more personal that way.
Sure.
But the thing that I hate is the Bible verse. And I know that sounds crazy.
It is not.
I know that sounds crazy.
Jeremiah 29.
No, let me tell you the craziest one.
Oh.
Craziest one, Ian. I guarantee you, nowhere in the history of graduation Sundays
Please
has
tell
this
me
verse.
it's that her breast will fulfill me for the whole of my life. That was the one that one of my students was like, that's my favorite verse.
No.
Goals.
No. But that is hilarious, and it makes me blush that somebody would have said that. No, the one that this kid. So this was one of those kids that like he hadn't come in years.
Oh, was it Deuteronomy 23:1?
It's Genesis 27:3-4. You're like, what is that?
Yeah.
Let me tell you, this kid's a big hunter. Big hunter. So think Jacob, Esau.
Right.
So the verse is, take your bow and a quiver full of arrows and go out into the open country to hunt some wild game for me.
I mean, he knew what he wanted.
So this verse is a primary illustration of somebody saying, Google verses about bow hunting. Like things I love. Well, that's going to be my favorite verse. So look, here's the deal. We read that because at that point I had already read all these other kids and I'm like, I have to read it, you know?
Right.
And so take your bow and quiver full of arrows and go to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. That's not for you. That's not a directive. That's not something. That is a narrative passage. It's not something application driven.
Oh my gosh. Listen,
but anyway, that's just my absolute grinds my gears to put favorite Bible verse on there. And most of the time too, like not all of your kids, but there are kids who are just biblically not getting in the word and doing any reading. And so it just ends up being a shallow question.
So whether it's your pet peeve or not, just I think that the takeaway from this is be mindful of what it is that you want to do, of what you want to read on stage and then go for it. But I do think we kind of carved out 3 things on how to make it excellent. One of those things is it's good to have service integration. What we mean by that is, even if you're a couple weeks behind or you're way behind this, you need to be doing this stuff earlier than right now. But if you're getting ready for Senior Sunday, you need to get with your pastor and do it now, even if it's a couple weeks from now, and slot it into your main worship service. Don't just do it in youth group if you don't have to. Find a way in front of the whole church to bring them in. And man, whether you do cap and gown and it's formal, or whether you walk students across stage and you let everybody know who they are, whatever it is, find a way, man. If you want to it's easy to make short montage videos, but keep the worship Christ-centered. But man, it's good, I think, to use songs about surrender or trust or next steps, those kind of things, but find a way to integrate it into your service. We've shared some of our stories. I think treating it like a mini graduation is a really cool thing, no matter if you wear cap and gown or not. And set up a quick picture booth, and you as the student pastor take pictures with all your kids. Move that booth. If you do a lunch for them, move it to where their families can take pictures.
Yeah.
But that's a big
during
deal.
COVID, the high schools shut down. They didn't do graduation. So we actually had an outdoor graduation for our graduating seniors. We invited their families and stuff. Awesome. And instead of giving them a diploma, we gave them like their gift or whatever. So we adapted for that year. But I think for us, like contextually, right. So we do the cap and gown.
Yeah.
We do the pomp and circumstance. And there may be somebody out there that's like I was 10 years ago that would say, well, that takes the focus off of Christ. I suppose I could see that. But I think for us, like the bigger thing is what we've kind of already talked about. Like this is a spiritual landmark for families. This is celebrating the commitment those families have made. And then at the end of service, when we're introducing them, when we send a mission team out at the conclusion of service, we lay hands on those people and we send them out. We have their parents come down forward and lay hands on them. And then we pray over them as a congregation and kind of commission them into what's next.
I just think, I can't imagine the things I've seen around ministry that people would say what you're saying, but that's such a just non-starter argument that it's not Christ-centered if it's about, because the whole point of the church is that we rejoice together, we mourn together, we struggle together. And that's something that a lot of people rejoice. And it puts emphasis, just for the over spiritual negative Nellies, that puts emphasis on intergenerational discipleship. That puts that the older can celebrate with the younger. But if we do,
and one of my favorite questions, Ian, one of my absolute favorite questions is like, raise your hand if you're sitting in the congregation when I have all the students standing up there and they're facing out. Raise your hand if you, at any point in this child's life, from baby, rocking them in babies, all the way to today, if you have served them in some way over the course of the last 18 years of their life. And to see the amount of people in our congregation that raise their hand, it's emotional for me every time. And I get goosebumps. It's emotional. I really believe it's emotional for these students.
Yeah, absolutely.
To see like, man, this is not really just about me. Like these people have a direct investment in me. I think that's a huge thing. I think other things you can do kind of creatively.
Yeah.
We have a brunch. So we have a brunch during the first service. We have memory tables set up where families come in and they decorate them with pictures, trophies, whatever. We serve them just a little. We serve them just a little bit of food, breakfast food. And then we give them a gift, kind of my go-to right now for the past few years. There's a book, which normally I'm not a big book giver, but this particular book's from Crossway. It's called Surviving College 101. And it's written in a way where this father, who's a pastor, wrote letters to his daughter about different things that she was going to be questioned about or faced. And so I just tell students, like, hey, I'm going to give this to you. If you want to read it now, great. But if not, if you'll make me the commitment that you'll put it in your drawer next to your bed in your dorm room, and when you begin to get faced with some of these critical questions, A, know you can call me. B, refer to the book, because the book has the questions that in 15 years of student ministry, these are the questions that students tell me that they wrestle with and they face. And so I just want to resource them for what I know is coming.
Right. I think that's why I love Bibles so much, is because I made a commitment to myself years and years ago that no student would ever graduate my ministry with an adventure Bible. And before you get the youth worker that goes, it's okay, they've had it for years. Yeah, well, I've had clothes since I was 3. I don't still wear them. So like at one point you need to grow out of that. And so I I think that's really big. And to make sure, if you're right, books can be hard. Although we're seeing that Gen Z and Gen A are heading back towards books and reading like print books more often. But yeah, you've got service integration, church and family involvement. I think having your families come forward and lay hands on them like you do, John, is such a really cool thing. I think that whether you get them together to eat or to talk, whether you get mentors and like we'd have juniors sign up to come and bless kids, whatever that looks like, man, incorporate younger students, anything that you can get in there, even sometimes symbolic gifts. I've not done this for seniors, but for Father's Day, I remember I bought small hatchets, if you remember, and they were, we call them for warriors and builders. And the idea that a hatchet is it can be to fight and it can be to build. And so that's what every man is. But at the end of the day, for us as believers, man, we have got to really invest in our students as they step into this milestone. And so I guess we're going to go to the second half of the podcast. I'll tell you this as we head out. Listen, every student pastor out there prepping your slideshows, your printed bulletins, writing speeches, you are shaping the next chapter of these students' lives. So keep going with what you're doing. But if today hit home, there's more where that came from. So part 2 of this conversation, we're going to be dropping it behind the wall. So just click the link below to get started. But if you do that, you're going to be able to check out our new Shaping Senior Sunday pack. Listen, it gives you a whole set of things to do with your parents behind the table. So it's a matter of how well do you know your student, to what's the plan to be discipled after you graduate and go to college. We've got all that pulled together. It's tried, true, and tested, because we're not just making things for student pastors. We are student pastors. So we'll see you behind the wall.